Is Dead Man's Hand still good? Dead Man's Hand is a first-person shooter developed by Human Head Studios and released on the Xbox back in 2004. A Windows version was also available, but this game never made it to the PlayStation 2 or GameCube. After Dead Man's Hand, Human Head Studios would go on to develop the well-received Prey, and the company is still around, though it isn't clear to me what exactly they do anymore. In any case, while Dead Man's Hand didn't exactly light the world on fire upon release, the reviews were generally positive. 1UP scored the game a 6.5 out of 10, stating, "As an FPS, Dead Man's Hand is nothing special at all. As an experience though, Dead Man's Hand is a blast." Game Informer gave the game a 7.8 out of 10, noting, "There are way too many technical problems to list, but it makes up for them with a cool theme, fun environmental interactions, a decent story, and gameplay that's, well, fun." Finally, GamePro magazine scored the game an 8 out of 10, proclaiming, "Despite its failings, Dead Man's Hand has enough character, style, and atmosphere to make it an enjoyable time killer." So, is Dead Man's Hand still this good? Let's dive in. The story of Dead Man's Hand is about as cliched as they come. You are El Tejon, part of an outlaw gang simply known as the Nine, led by Tennessee Vic. Tejon was drawn to the outlaw lifestyle in hopes of becoming a famous gunslinger. Unfortunately, the gang is notoriously ruthless, and Tejon decides killing women and children no longer fits the gunslinger image he was hoping to achieve, and he decides to part ways. Tennessee Vic disagrees, informing Tejon he drew the dead man's hand, and then shoots him, but Tejon doesn't die, and is discovered by law enforcement, who are all too eager to let him rot in a jail cell. While the story isn't going to win any points for originality, it does a perfect job setting the tone for the game. There is a hero, there are 8 villains, and we have a motive: revenge. With the story out of the way, let's get to the game. Between each level is a screen showing you the available missions you can play through. This is generally linear, with one mission unlocking the next, though you can repeat missions if you'd like. There is also some story text for each, detailing the journey across the Old West, as well as a difficulty select. The first mission is busting out of jail. This acts as a tutorial, familiarizing you with the controls. Thankfully, Dead Man's Hand uses the standard dual analog setup, so there is no real learning curve. What is somewhat unique is the power meter. By shooting certain objects, killing enemies in rapid succession, or performing trick shots, this meter will fill. The trick shots include the crush kill, exploding kill, and a hat trick. Filling the power meter gives you access to a secondary fire for each of the game's 9 weapons, such as rapid fire and scopes. Using the secondary fire depletes the power meter, as one would imagine. Killing enemies and performing trick shots also earns you points, but as best as I can tell, the points don't unlock any goodies and aren't required for progression, but the points are a nice nod to gaming's past, where points were everything. With the relatively short 5-minute tutorial out of the way, the second mission is unlocked, and a few more gimmicks are introduced. First, you can see the game's 9 weapons, including 3 pistols, 3 rifles, and 3 shotguns. Only one of each is initially selectable, but you'll unlock more as the quest unfolds, but I'll get to them a little later. The second gimmick is a game of poker. Before each mission begins, you can draw up to 3 cards per hand, or 4 if you have an ace. If you manage to secure a poker hand, you are rewarded with extra ammo as well as power for the power meter. You can quit at any time, and if you fail to win a hand, you lose everything. Dead Man's Hand is fairly generous though, and the deck is stacked in your favor, allowing you to begin most missions with a decent supply of ammo. This is certainly not a deep game of poker by any stretch, but a charming addition adding to the overall feel. The next thing you'll likely notice is how both Tejon and the enemies do a lot of trash talking, reminding me a bit of Duke Nukem. Dead Man's Hand never takes itself too seriously, which I rather enjoy. The missions themselves are rather linear, putting you on a fairly straight path from the beginning of the stage to the end. There isn't much of an open world here, but if you do check the little nooks and crannies, you will find extra ammo drops and health packs, and there are plenty of places to take cover. You'll also want to keep your eyes open for those trick shots, which will often make things much easier. For example, rather than running up this ladder, you can shoot an exploding barrel, which swings down and wipes out the enemy. I should also note, as there are only 3 guns and a knife, swapping guns is extremely easy, and each is mapped to a different direction on the D-pad. While you have full control over weapon selection, the aiming has a mind of its own. I'm clearly shooting the guy nearest to me, but the guy in the background drops dead. After making your way through the western town, we finally arrive at a cutscene with some bantering back and forth between Taehon and one of the members of the Nine. There are 2 things worth noting about the boss fights. First, there is actually a bit of level to traverse through before reaching the boss, and second, the boss has a life bar. The life bar is invaluable. As the stage has multiple baddies, it's not always clear which is the boss you need to take down and which is some generic goon. The life bar lets you know when you are doing damage to the prime target. Sadly, the first boss is a bit of a letdown, as there is an incredibly helpful indicator on the screen letting you know when a bullet has whizzed by you, and the bar changes colors right when the boss shoots. It's exceptionally easy to get in pop shots while the boss reloads and take cover while he shoots. Upon defeat, Taehon's main squeeze Jenny arrives, happy to see her lover is still alive. This doesn't really go anywhere, but I guess it gives Taehon a reason to stay alive while he races through the Old West seeking his revenge. With the town missions over, Taehon makes his way through some canyon settings. The color palette doesn't change much, sticking firmly with a desaturated sepia look. The gameplay doesn't change much either, just make your way slowly forward, taking down a few foes at a time, and taking cover when necessary. If you keep your eyes open, you'll notice some more of those trick shots, like these boulders. Moving on, I must note Dead Man's Hand does a good job with the difficulty progression. After making your way through the canyons, the level opens up a bit, putting you in an ancient village. Here, enemies have more of an opportunity to sneak up on you. Thankfully, the indicator does an excellent job alerting you to the direction of danger, and you always have just the right amount of information needed for success. Like before, after a few missions, we arrive at another boss fight against a member of the Nine. Here, Flat Iron has a knife fetish and prefers to throw blades at Taehon rather than shoot. But we also learn another trick shot. You can shoot the knives out of the air, which is pretty cool. This battle is also noticeably more challenging than the first, as the fight takes place in a maze of sorts, and the boss actually runs around. However, with a little patience and some good timing, he too will go down. As you unlock more missions on the map, a few bonus levels will become available. Much like the points, these seem to be completely optional with no real reward for completion. In any case, the first bonus area reminds me a bit of Cliff Palace, and some vertical elements are added to the level design, which is nice. Continuing on to the main missions, Dead Man's Hand gives us more variety in the form of an on-rail shooter level. Taehon is on horseback and takes out enemies while the horse runs along a predetermined path. You can also shoot at health packs to restore health, which is a thoughtful touch. After the horse riding adventure, the action returns to the traditional first-person shooting, now in some mines. This is probably a good time to talk about the 9 weapons. While you unlock new pistols, rifles, and shotguns as the adventure unfolds, and these feature different secondary modes, the new guns are not really upgrades. As best as I can tell, all 9 weapons do similar amounts of damage. However, the range of each is different. The shotguns, for example, only work at close range, as one would expect. However, the firing rate is way too slow. If you're close enough, they might take down an enemy in a single shot, but this is not guaranteed. And with the slow reloading, it really isn't worth it. The rifle works best at range, as one would expect, and as we saw earlier, you don't even need to be right on an enemy for it to go down. Just shoot near it and you'll register a hit. This makes the rifle the best weapon in the game. On top of this, the revolving rifle reloads very fast, and its secondary fire even faster, making it arguably the best weapon in the entire game. And because the aiming is very, forgiving, the zoom function of the other 2 rifles is rendered pointless. Simply fire twice at any enemy, regardless of distance, and they will be dead. However, ammo is not unlimited, and eventually you'll run out. This is where the pistol becomes the de facto second best weapon. The final pistol you unlock is the superior choice, as it can fire 4 rounds in rapid succession. While it doesn't have the guaranteed 2 hits and the enemy is dead feature of the rifle, the rapid fire makes it a decent weapon while you hunt for rifle ammo. Moving on, Tejon eventually makes his way out of the mine and through an old mine town, arriving at yet another member of the Nine. Sadly, this is another unsatisfying boss, and it won't be too hard to outduel your foe. According to the map screen, Tejon is making some serious progress across the western United States and has arrived in the redwood forests of Northern California. I really appreciate the level diversity found in Dead Man's Hand. While I generally think of old wooden ghost towns when I think of the old American West, Human Head Studios did an awesome job representing a massive variety of locales. Another weapon in Dead Man's Hand is also introduced, Dynamite, which functions like a grenade. If I'm honest, I didn't find myself using these much. There were a few occasions where running right into a gun turret didn't make much sense, but these instances are rare. With that, let's move on to the next boss. Like the bosses before, there's actually a decent amount of level to traverse through before reaching the boss. Here we find ourselves in a logging village, which one would expect after the romp through the forest. The level gimmicks also remain, with a few different opportunities to land some crushing kills, if you so choose. This leads us to one of the toughest boss encounters in the game. The boss seems immune to gunfire, and the level geometry prevents you from getting close. The game wants you to use the dynamite found at the back of the arena. This will regenerate as well, so you can keep the explosions going. Unfortunately, 2 enemies also regenerate. As best as I can tell, this is the first instance of enemies regenerating found in the game up to this point, and it definitely took me by surprise. Eventually, I figured out how long it would take for the enemies to respawn, leaving me enough time to launch dynamite sticks before turning around and taking down the respawned enemies. Still, with the boss chucking axes at you on one side of the area and the enemy shooting at you from the opposite side, it can be tough to manage, and overall it lacks the structure and polish found in Dead Man's Hand up to this point. In any case, once you figure out the pattern and take down the axe-wielding member of the Nine, another bonus mission becomes available, where Tejon finds himself at a fort where they appear to sacrifice people. It seems you're supposed to defend the fort or take out a specific number of enemies or something. In any case, after a few failed attempts, and since the last bonus stage yielded no reward, I did what any sensible person would do. I moved on. The next area in Dead Man's Hand is a train depot. This is one of my favorite levels. It features a little of everything, including close combat, ranged combat, and a ton of elevation changes as you progress through the depot. The level structure and constant barrage of enemy combatants makes this an action-packed, fun-filled level. Sadly, it also highlights the biggest issue I have with Dead Man's Hand. There are no checkpoints. You must complete a mission from beginning to end without death. If you die, you go back. I don't know if this was merely an oversight of the developers, or if they were looking to pad length, but it sucks to make it 10 minutes into a level, only to restart the whole thing over again. Much like a classic shmup, it does allow you to learn a level as enemy positions don't change, meaning you'll likely breeze through the level on your second or third trip, but still, it feels like a dated concept. After taking down another member of the Nine in a church of all places, we make our way to a town on a river, and I finally discovered a use for the shotgun. This sub-boss character reloads at just the right speed where you can shoot him, causing him to restart his loading animation, and you sort of get him stuck in a loop until he goes down. Yeah, the enemy AI isn't always the best. As we make our way through the town, I also noted another key enemy behavior. They seem to do less damage the farther away you are. If you get too close to an enemy, they'll mow you down quickly, but if you stay at a reasonable distance and use the pistol or rifle, you should be able to stay in a nice shooting rhythm, taking on a reasonable amount of damage before reaching the next health pack. Once you get into the flow of the game, it feels exceptionally balanced. If you exercise enough caution with your movement and enough aggression with your shooting, you'll find the pacing here is excellent, keeping you in a fun gunfight a majority of the time. The difficulty also continues to ramp up, and each mission is usually a touch more challenging than the one before. This battle in a brothel is a good example. Despite my methodical, conservative approach to first-person shooters, I did find myself dying a few times by not being fully aware of my surroundings. While the level design is generally linear, there are some branching paths that converge, giving the AI enemies a chance to sneak around behind you. Again, the AI isn't particularly strong, but they still still shows some smarts now and again. After a boss battle against a woman who isn't part of the 9, Dead Man's Hand offers another rail shooting level, and we loop back to the town where the game started, presumably to assist a few of the fine folks who busted us out of jail in the first place. This is the only time Dead Man's Hand forces you through a set piece a second time. Most of this is new, however, but a few small areas are repeats. In a way, it makes up for the lack of checkpoints, as other than in this section, nothing else is repeated, and there is absolutely no backtracking, which is awesome. After tromping through the village and a boss fight where the shotgun again reaffirms how useless it truly is, Tejon makes his way through a sawmill, more members of the 9, and a cemetery before arriving at Gentleman John Kendall. This is another great boss encounter. You really need to take note of the boss's firing pattern and fire when it's safe, along with memorizing health pack locations to be successful. It took me a few times, but nothing here is frustrating. It's obvious there is a pattern to learn and exploit, making defeating this tough boss a very satisfying experience. After taking down Gentleman John, Tejon meets back up with Jenny, his love interest. Then Dead Man's Hand offers a new mission type, in this case simply surviving an all-out assault on Jenny's hideout. The waves of enemies are relentless, and the near constant action is pretty damn terrific. After defending Jenny's hideout, Tejon promises to return to find her after he finally takes down the leader of the 9, Tennessee Vic. With that, we move on to the final few levels of Dead Man's Hand. It seems Tennessee Vic is roaming the west on a train, and Tejon catches up with him on horseback. After an on-rail shooting segment, Tejon jumps on the train and starts making his way towards the engine. After making your way through the train, a rather lengthy cutscene is played, showing some smack talk between Tejon and Tennessee Vic. Tejon then calls his horse, hops on, and flips the railroad track, causing Tennessee Vic to derail. This brings us to the final level, the boss fight with Tennessee Vic, and yes, this is a worthy final level. This mission is quite challenging, even on the normal difficulty. Basically, this is a circular arena. Tennessee Vic is in the middle, surrounded by various train cars, acting as a barrier. Around the outside of the level, enemies will spawn and respawn, meaning you can't stay in one place too long, as enemies will swarm you from the outside and the inside. After many deaths, learning spawn points, learning Vic's patterns, and locating ammo and health pickups, I was able to make my way around the arena, getting in shots, then restocking on supplies, before making my way to the next location and repeating the process. The enemies here are relentless, but not impossible, and after learning all the nooks and crannies, Tennessee Vic finally went down. The adventure then comes to a close. Tejon completes his mission, getting his revenge on the 9. Jenny arrives and the two gallop off into the sunset. Then, of course, the credits roll. Graphically speaking, Dead Man's Hand is a mixed bag. I love the overall art direction. Perhaps I'm just a sucker for westerns, but I really enjoyed making my way through the various Wild West set pieces, and most of the models seem detailed enough. However, the texture work is poor. Most textures are of the low-res variety, making the game look muddy as a result. There are exceptions, but a vast majority of the game looks blurry, like a high-res N64 game, if that makes sense. Even worse is the frame rate. When there isn't much on the screen, it will run at 60 frames per second, but more often than not, it's more like 30. And it will drop to around 10 when the action picks up, making certain sections artificially difficult as the game can't seem to keep up with the button presses. On the flip side, the sound design is awesome. The frequent banter between enemies and the grumblings of Tejon are entertaining, giving the game a ton of charm, and is never too frequent where it becomes annoying. Gun sounds are also satisfying, with plenty of weight helping you feel like a badass. But most enjoyable of all is the soundtrack. There is a ton of classic western and mariachi sounds here, but also mixed in is some lounge-style beats using period-accurate instruments, helping the sound direction feel old but still contemporary. The variety from beginning to end is surprising, and every single piece is of high quality. It really is a stark contrast to the graphics, which are a mixed bag. So, with all of that out of the way, we arrive back to the question asked at the beginning of the video: is Dead Man's Hand still good? Let me start by saying this has been one of the most challenging reviews to write. Dead Man's Hand is flawed for sure. While the controls are responsive and modern, the aiming is simply way too forgiving, and hitting enemies isn't difficult at all. The game design choices make the rifle the best weapon in the game by a mile, rendering a majority of the game's already small roster of 9 guns underwhelming. Next, half of the game's bosses are real pushovers, offering little challenge. You can usually shoot faster than they can, making victory a foregone conclusion. Then of course there is the checkpoint issue. Perhaps the Windows version offers a solution to this problem, but the complete lack of checkpoints in this Xbox version is baffling. The game was released in 2004, long after the FPS genre had laid the ground rules for what is correct in regards to checkpoints. And finally, the game's main gimmick, the power meter, feels wasted. The secondary firing modes aren't better than the primary modes. Not only this, the crushing gimmick featured prominently in the first half of the game is all but abandoned in the second half, like they forgot about it. Yet despite these issues, there is something insanely fun about Dead Man's Hand. I felt engaged through the game's 6.5-hour runtime, and at no point did fatigue or boredom set in. The game just oozes style, making this one a real treat from start to finish. From the cheesy one-liners,
I need a drink,
the abundance of great background music, and the sheer variety of natural and man-made environments to shoot through, Dead Man's Hand packs a ton of personality and charm. And while it admittedly gets a few basic items wrong, like the weapon selection and checkpoints, it gets the more challenging gameplay aspects absolutely right. The levels themselves are thoughtful, doing a great job pushing you forward to the next firefight, without ever becoming confusing, boring, or stale. The balance here is spot on. With the bosses being the exception, the difficulty curve is also nearly perfect. The earlier stages are easy enough to traverse through, but the challenge is slowly ramped up as the adventure unfolds, adding more enemies, putting those enemies in tougher locations, like up high, and even adding in environmental hazards like fog, putting the player at a further disadvantage without being unfair. The last few boss fights in particular are amazing, really forcing you to use your noodle, while also requiring some shooting proficiency. It really is terrific stuff, and it's amazing to think Human Head Studios could get the complex tasks right while whiffing on some basic things. So yeah, Dead Man's Hand is still a good game, a very good game in my opinion. It may not be the most innovative shooter ever to grace the Xbox, but if you're a fan of the genre and looking to play something not set in World War II or space, Dead Man's Hand is worth a look.